It's been a fairly quiet week in Husker football news while we await spring updates, although Adrian did give us some insight from his thoughts this past season, so let's get into it. Hi, I'm Adrian Muller, and this is episode 36 of the Cobsmacked Podcast. This is a Nebraska football podcast where we cover the Husker season and team news as it progresses throughout the year. If you enjoy the content, please consider leaving a like and following. It really helps me get some feedback on the videos and helps me spread the channel. So, getting into the Husker news, again, it's been fairly quiet this week. There hasn't been a ton going on. Although there seems to be plenty of drama, like news around men's basketball, women's basketball, and now Husker baseball, but we don't talk about round ball sports here. So as far as Big Ten goes, it seems like the Big Ten will be getting a big boost in revenue from the media contract that they have. So it'll be the first collegiate conference to break $1 billion year-by-year basis. So later this year, they will renegotiate its current $440 million contract with Fox and ESPN for the media rights for the games. It sounds like from a bunch of different sports like business sources that they're projecting that is going to more than double this next season because of the viewing numbers that the Big Ten had and how we're really catching up to the SEC, even surpassing them in many ways. It seems like it's going to more than double. So we're setting up to break that $1 billion barrier. So that should be good for all teams involved, including Nebraska. Getting into transfer news, there is a transfer, Orshawn Mathis, I believe that's how you pronounce it. He announced that Nebraska is still in his final 5 schools for consideration. He has USC, Ole Miss, Texas, Penn State, and Nebraska still as his final 5. He is transferring from TCU, and he is one of the top pass rushers in the portal as well. He won conference honors for both of the last 2 seasons in the Big 12. He's very high on the priority list for Nebraska. He might be like the top target as far as the coaching staff goes. So we are in desperate need for a big-time pass rusher. This guy has experience. He has shown the ability to be a high-level pass rusher. So he seems like he's the guy. I'm not sure how likely we are to pull him from the likes of USC and Texas. But since he does have that TCU connection, maybe since we have the running backs coach now from TCU, maybe that's a connection that'll help us get him in the door. Also, so following last week's visit from the Omaha Coaching Clinic, Frost & Company visited Lincoln this week. It's the same goal in mind, keeping in-state talent in-state. So they're strengthening the bonds with the high schools and with the players and coaches from those high schools. Some people are kind of criticizing the lateness of the push to keep these in-state kids in-state. Like, why did it take the new coaching staff for you to realize you needed to focus on the in-state schools? But, I'm sure that the additions of Mickey Joseph and Bill Busch have pushed that agenda more this season. You also have to remember that COVID shut down a lot of these annual coaching conventions and things. Meetups weren't as open and possible as they are now. So I think that you should kind of balance that out with the fact that the world's been kind of crazy the last couple of years, and obviously there's been a lot going on with the program the way it is. But Mickey Joseph and Bill Busch have certainly been pushing that we need to keep these guys from going other places, just because they're already in the culture. You don't have to build culture with a kid that grew up here. So looking at one of those kids, looking where Gage Stenger fits into the program, he's listed rather vaguely on the Husker website, husker.com, as an athlete. He's not listed as a position. I brought him up before because of that. I thought that was kind of odd that they didn't tell him he was going to play any certain position here. They haven't figured it out even now. It sounds like, he played quarterback and some defense at Millard South in Omaha, but it sounds like that's where he's going to start out training. He's going to be training with the quarterbacks at the beginning of spring, but he thinks that he would fit in at safety and nickel, and he thinks that that's probably where he's going to end up, at that safety nickel position. He has the frame and the athletic traits to do so. He could play a ton of different positions, but I think that those are the two he's really eyeing, and that the coaching staff is probably eyeing for him as well. He is 6'2", 205 pounds, and he does run a 4.6 40-yard dash. So, like I said, he has the frame and the ability to play a lot of different positions, but I think the safety is probably a pretty good, guess as to where he's going to end up because of that secondary needing, depth and some talent back there. So before we get into the main story, I do want to announce that the new website is up. I've been working on it and it's live now. It'll be a collective source for all things Cobsmacked. It's going to have obviously I'll still upload these podcast videos there. They'll be embedded YouTube videos. But I also want to add more like blog style articles to the website as well. Think like Husker Online. They have the videos, but they also have these blog type articles that might cover things that aren't found in the podcast episodes. So things like more in-depth stats after games or stories about Husker history. I like history, so diving back into different coaching areas, different games, different eras of Husker football, that's interesting to me. So I'll just put out an article that some people might read. If you don't read it, that's fine too. I'm speaking to a couple of people about possibly adding articles relating to basketball, baseball, and volleyball. I don't follow any of those sports. As I mentioned, I don't follow round ball sports closely. As I mentioned on my Twitter feed, I do support Husker sports regardless of the sport. I only watch football. But along with some articles centering on Nebraska as a state, I think those would be kind of interesting to throw on there. I'm interviewing some fans, maybe players, about their favorite local spots around Omaha, Lincoln. If they go fishing, like where do they go fishing? What are they fishing for? It seems like a lot of the players go fishing, but as well as throwing out some occasional game day recipes I'll throw up on the website as well. So I'm still updating the store on there. There is a ability to buy like sweaters, shirts, things like that from the store. It's completely optional, but it's a great way to show support for the channel. As well as pick up another hoodie to add to your collection. So getting into the main story, though, we do have Adrian Martinez. He hit on a ton of different topics from his latest episode of the Athletes Unfiltered podcast. If you followed it at all during the season, he didn't really update it. Jojo Doman had the Beat podcast with Sean Callahan, and they updated it weekly, like even throughout the season as the season was progressing. So it was like real-time updates from the locker room, whereas Adrian's was more like they kind of cut it off at the beginning of the season. They did a bunch of episodes up to that, and then they would release them, but they were all like pre-recorded essentially. But since he's left, I was kind of wondering if they were still going to do it, because I believe the co-host for that is based in Lincoln, or he is a Lincoln student. But it sounds like they're going to continue with the podcast with those two guys, which is good. I like the background, the insight from a player's perspective, and then the other co-host as well. He's very professional. So, the Athletes Unfiltered podcast is highly recommended. I check out every episode, so you guys should probably go do that as well. If you want to find the full episode after this, I'll have a link in the description below. And I've kind of seen it kind of twisted as well. So things seem to be like, whenever I read it in like the newspaper or online articles and things, they're kind of twisting it around to sound like Adrian's kind of talking shit. And I didn't get that perspective from listening to the episode myself. So some of the topics he touched on. So his decision to leave, he did say that was more to do with him than it was to do with Nebraska. After talking with NFL scouts, they kind of were wondering if maybe it'd be better for him to go somewhere else and see how he would perform in another environment. And so after hearing that, he kind of, that played heavily into his decision. He believes that Scott Frost wanted him to stay, but that Frost understood his decision to go somewhere. And he said that there was a lot of love between those two guys. Like, he has a tremendous amount of respect for Scott Frost as the coach of Nebraska and how much like he goes through behind the scenes. He's like, nobody understands the pressures that guy goes through besides him. Nobody can understand the pressures of being a head coach at Nebraska except for a head coach at Nebraska. He said the same thing kind of goes for the quarterback at Nebraska. Nobody really knows what that's like except for a guy who's been in that position. So he respects him as a coach, and he respects him as a former quarterback for Nebraska as well. Talking on his broken jaw. So he talked about how it was a freak play that broke his jaw. He's like, how do you break your jaw when you have a football helmet on? He says, well, that's how you have a freak play. So he felt like his whole face blew up. He was a big advocate for walking himself off the field. He made comparisons to like when Kobe tore his Achilles and walked off the court. So he's a big advocate for like that toughness and showing like no weakness for your team. And like, if I can do it, you can do it too. So initially, they thought he had a concussion on the sideline, and I thought he kept like checking his teeth. And I mentioned this in the post game too. I thought he was checking his teeth like he might have chipped a tooth or he might have lost a tooth or something, but that doesn't seem to be the case. He says after he went back to the locker room, they did a X-ray, and it was a painfully slow process from the sounds of it, and that was inconclusive. He says that, you know, it was slow. What a wonder. Like, the lady took her time. He says the shoulder pads were probably in the way because he was still in full gear when he got the X-rays done. So he's like, we wasted all that time basically for nothing. He goes back out onto the sideline, and they asked him, "Are you good to go?" And he said, "Honestly, not really, but let's fucking go." So he probably shouldn't have returned back, but he did because that's kind of the guy he is. So it wasn't after they returned to Lincoln anyway that they did a CAT scan and realized that he actually had a broken jaw during that. And he had two options at that point. So he could either get the surgery or he could get the 6 screws and rubber bands to delay it or like to fuse it separately. There's always the risk of re-injury with that as well, though. So he tried to keep the entire thing secret for his safety. When we go against other teams, you don't want them to know that you have something broken because, like it or not, some guys are probably going to target that. But he took out the bands. Like he went as far as like taking out the bands during press conferences and trying not to smile during press conferences because you would see the screws in his mouth and things like that. So he was also on an all liquid diet for a while. He had like one little comment about putting steak in a blender and it being like the consistency of oatmeal. That's not appetizing the way it is, but he sounded like he tried to put like olives and stuff in it to like give it better flavor, and that was a bad idea. So he's like, that was the worst. Like, I wouldn't recommend it. But the secret for the broken jaw came out on a Fox broadcast during the Ohio State game, and then Scott Frost later confirmed it in the post game. So he said, I hadn't even told my grandma yet. It's like it's the industry, it's part of it, it sucks, but he would have rather it been a secret. He along on the injury line, he also dealt with a high ankle sprain just before the Minnesota game as well. Between the sprain and the jaw, it limited his ability to run, and so they weren't calling the plays that they would have in a normal situation. So I mean, there's a lot of things that, and Scott Frost made this comment during the season 2. He said that if you guys knew what he was going through, like, you wouldn't be talking as much as you are. So it sounds like he went through a lot. We knew he broke his jaw after the Ohio State game, but just to know like more details on like what he actually had to go through during that process is a little more informative. So he also talked about missed opportunities as a team. So he touched on the Michigan State game. He said that could have been a huge momentum turn for us. We had the game won. We should have won that game. He says that multiple times against a lot of these games, but touched on the Michigan fumble to end the game where he fumbled it. A lot of people thought that the play should have blown dead. He's still surprised that the play wasn't blown dead, but he still accepts 100% responsibility for the fumble. He said it doesn't matter. The game was on the line, and, I can't do that. He said the referee did say, like, I don't know why they didn't blow it either. He looked at him. He's like, why wasn't there a whistle? And the ref's like, I don't know. I don't know what they were doing. Minnesota, talking on that game, we had mentioned that Cam Taylor-Britt said that there was like a lack of juice on the field or in the locker room before the game. And Martinez said he doesn't like that lacking juice excuse. He doesn't like the lacking energy excuse. He said there's a lot of missed opportunities, like not scoring from the 1-yard line. Like that's a missed opportunity. He said so lack of energy wasn't the big problem. It was probably certainly there, but it wasn't the thing that he would focus on. And to prove his point, he said that we did have better energy at the Purdue game, obviously, and we still lost anyway. So there's more things to focus on besides just the energy, just besides the morale, which I'm guessing the morale played a big thing into it. But he said there was just, we should have won more games when we did. It was just like, it was weird to him that they didn't. There's more losses than energy in the locker room. And he said, we fell on our own sword a lot. That was a quote that he had. And yes, mistakes cost Nebraska a lot this past season. So it's kind of weird seeing through the eyes of the quarterback who kind of leads the team what his perspective on all the missed opportunities were. But it doesn't sound like he's making excuses at all. Like if you go listen to the podcast, he doesn't sound like he's blaming it or throwing anybody else under the bus. He's telling it how it is. He's being blunt, and like the team as a whole missed chances to win games. Another topic he touched on was the coaches getting fired midseason. So it was really tough on the program from his perspective. He felt some direct responsibility for the loss of Mario Verduzco. It wasn't a happy time for anybody. He said it wasn't a good, happy thing for anybody. Verdu was his coach for 4 years. Austin was Juergens' coach for 4 years, which that might play into the reason why Cam Juergens, decided to go to the NFL after the 4 years. He said that those are embedded relationships. Frost as well, he knew them and he knew their families, he knew their situations, and he still had to make that decision to let them go. But he said that's just what happens when you lose too many football games. The environment and the program expects wins from the players and from the coaching staff. So he said he's very glad that they had really good guys in the quarterback room. He wasn't sure how things would have processed if he didn't have good guys behind him. And just in the locker room in general, he said that there was good guys in the quarterback room, good guys in the locker room. Didn't let them quit after that, a loss of the coaches. So said, look at Wisconsin. So after that first game after they got fired, Wisconsin was up on the board, and they had the best defense in the Big Ten, and we still let them up offensively. So losing the coaching staff wasn't a reason that they were going to use to just give up on the season. And the guys in the locker room specifically weren't going to give up on the season, especially if they felt some kind of responsibility for the loss of their coach. They might feel like a duty to play harder. He did mention that he contacted Verduzco after the season and they caught up. There's no bad blood there. He said that that's somebody that will be in my life forever. The relationship won't go away just because he's no longer my quarterback's coach. So, I mean, that's nice that there's no bad blood there. Obviously Adrian's not the one that fired him, but you could see how there might be like some tension there. That's not the case at all. They're going to be close because they were together so closely for 4 years. It wasn't just like they seen each other for 4 years. They were like in each other's lives for that time. So touched on the end of his career and season at Nebraska. So he didn't know that Ohio State was going to be his last home game at Memorial Stadium. He said that the fact that it makes him even more special to him now that he's leaving. He says Memorial Stadium is even more special to me. It's really one of the top environments in college football, and he was really lucky to play there. He's very thankful for his time, and he says that genuinely. And I believe him. I believe that he really does, looking back on his time at Nebraska, he really does appreciate his time here and what he put in. His very next game after the Ohio State game, the Wisconsin game, he would injure his shoulder and it would hurt to throw. He, again, didn't expect that to be his last game period in a Husker uniform. And so sensing that it was that way at the end of the game after, like he said, it hurt to throw, he kind of sensed that was going to be his last time in a Husker uniform. So he kind of soaked in those last moments. You see pictures of like him hugging Brody Belt at the end of the game, and just, I mean, a lot of people were speculating that at the time, like, why is he kind of being very sentimental right now? Is this his last game? So it looks like that was the case. He kind of sensed that, and he really does, looking back on his time here, he really holds it dear to his heart. And so that's nice to hear as well. So he said, looking forward to a fresh start for both him and Nebraska. He says that he will always love Nebraska. He's given everything he can to Nebraska in his mind. He's not saying, like, I gave it like 80%. He went hard every season he was here. So it's his alma mater. He will love the place. He really does. But it's just business. It's a business decision for him. It's a business decision for Nebraska as a program. He noted that the split in the fan base, though, he said that there was some good that was like happy for him and supporting him in his decision to leave. And then those were people that, I'm glad he's gone. We're going to do so much better now. Like, there's obviously going to be that way. It's going to be that way no matter who it is. Nebraska and any fan base in general, when you get that big, you're going to have people on each side of the line. So I would like to say, after watching the interview, that as always, Adrian has remained classy. I agree with him when he says that he left everything on the field. He gave everything to the program while he was here. I truly believe that. I mean, if you watch him, he was the embodiment of like toughness, especially after hearing all the injuries and things that he went through. I don't feel like he left anything here to be speculated on. Obviously, we would have liked more wins for him here, but I wish him luck as he prepares for this next season at Kansas State. So that's going to wrap up this week's episode. What do you think of Adrian's comments? If you got a chance to listen to the interview, what do you think? Do you think he's being genuine? Do you think he authentically believes that Nebraska is a really good place to come? Looking past that, though, are you still excited for spring ball and seeing how the roster actually starts to shape up? It's going to be, hopefully we have some news to report on the next few weeks in regards to spring training and things like that. But let me know in the comments below, or you can find me on Twitter at Cobsmacked Pod. Also, don't forget to check out the website at Cobsmacked.com and let me know what you think. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you guys would like to see in the merch store. But until next time, go Big Red.